Dave Bolger here, and welcome to Had I Known, conversations with interesting members of the Hamilton College community. This week's guest is Congressman Matt Cartwright, class of 1983. All right, I'm back. I'm sorry. I know it's been a little erratic. Missed last week, but I'm back. We're going to get back on schedule. Truth is, I meant to be on schedule last week. Snuck in a little end of the summer Labor Day trip, brought the gear with me to an Airbnb in the beautiful mid-coast region of Maine, and had every intention of doing my usual finish things up on Saturday night. But after a long bike ride and a long day of activity with my family, putting my son to bed, I fell asleep. I fell asleep. And I got up late. I was groggy, and it just wasn't happening. So I figured I would let you all have your Labor Day holiday as well. So if you were looking for a new episode last week, I'm sorry. Judging from the statistics I've seen, many of you used it as an opportunity to catch up on previous episodes. So thanks. Hope you enjoyed them. So now we're getting into the fall, back into a rhythm, back on schedule. And I'm going to get back to a new conversation every week with an interesting member of the Hamilton community. And that's certainly true this week. Congressman Matt Cartwright from Pennsylvania joins this week. He represents Pennsylvania's 8th Congressional District. He serves on the House Appropriations Committee and is the chairman of the Appropriations Subcommittee for Congress, Justice, and Science. He's also the vice chair of the Financial Services and General Government Appropriations Subcommittee. And he's one of the co-chairs of the House Democratic Policy and Communications Committee. I was excited to get a chance to talk to him, especially because we started scheduling our chat, which we recorded a few weeks ago now, but we started scheduling it while the infrastructure bill was hot and heavy. So I was more than a bit shocked and honored to get a chance to talk to the congressman. Hopefully this one was worth the week plus wait. I think it was. So the wait is over. Here is my conversation with Congressman Matt Cartwright, class of 1983. And I got to tell you, when now forever that I have the email of you saying that we needed to push back the time because you were trying to sort out the infrastructure bill. I am now going to tell people that I played a role. I feel like I've made an impact.
Ladies and gentlemen, students at Hamilton College, armed services abroad, let it be heard right here. Dave Bolger saved America.
There you go. Are we going to get? Is that is everything looking good? Is that going to get done or what?
Yeah, it was. I was nervous about it because obviously pushing the Build Back Better plan. The bigger what they call the reconciliation part of it. Was it was a little more difficult to pull across the finish line. So what they did was they tied it together with the bricks and mortar infrastructure, the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And I was nervous about that because that bipartisan bill is hugely popular. It has something like 80% popularity in this country. I mean, I read a lot of polls. Santa Claus doesn't get to 80% in this country. And I was worried about, jettisoning that in an attempt to do more, but it didn't happen. And it looks like it's going to be a happy ending.
Well, that's good. And I know it's something you've been talking about for a while, and the need for it, and especially in parts of your country, and given where you represent, certainly critical for your area as well. Or especially.
Well, yeah, I mean, all over the country. I mean, we haven't done a major infrastructure investment certainly the entire time I've been in Congress. I got elected in 2012. And, when you don't plow the money back into your portfolio of national assets to maintain them, to expand them, to improve them, when you don't do that, I mean, we're talking about roads and bridges and water systems and sewer systems. And when you don't keep these things up, bad things happen. That's why kids got poisoned in Flint, Michigan. It's just common sense. Why would we think we don't have to reinvest in our infrastructure? What we're these irresponsible children who were passed down this portfolio of assets, and we don't do anything to add to it or keep it up. That's ridiculous. It's time for the grown-ups in the room to take over.
And when you talk about infrastructure, it's the traditional infrastructure we think of when you talk about it. But I've heard you be pretty outspoken that there's modern infrastructure and the new type of infrastructure as well.
It's just no question. I mean, what we're doing right now, you and I are communicating over broadband internet right now, and there's so many parts of this country that just don't have it, and they need it. If they don't get it, they will be left behind. And it's very much analogous to when we brought electricity into the all of the hollers and the far places in this country 80 years ago with the Rural Electrification Act under the Roosevelt administration. The government did a nice job at it. And if they hadn't done it, think of it. For the last 80 years, there might be no electricity in a lot of places in America. Can you imagine what the people would, what would have turned out like without electricity, without the ability to communicate, without the ability to do so many of the things that run on old electricity? It's the same idea with broadband internet. Mm-hmm. If we leave people behind, we're going to create two separate Americas. And to me, that's intolerable.
Are you happy with where the bill stands now and its ability to do that? I know early on there was a greater focus on some of the more modern technologies.
I am. That's part of the reason we wanted to do both of those bills together, because if you just take the first part, the bipartisan one, that provides about 65% of the money we need to push in broadband internet into rural areas and to underserved areas. But if you only do 65%, you have to make choices, right? And so many of these choices are made by governors. And I'll never forget, our majority whip in the House is Jim Clyburn from Columbia, South Carolina. And he's a dear friend. And he shared with me that when he grew up, he grew up in a rural place in South Carolina, and he remembers what happened, because when they first pushed out electricity, it was the same way. They pushed it out to the governors, and there wasn't enough money for complete coverage. And when there isn't enough money for complete coverage, and the governors decide, well, he lived in a part of town that was on the wrong side of the tracks. And Jim Clyburn grew up in a household that had no electricity, even after the Rural Electrification Act started. That's the kind of thing that happens if you don't do all of it together.
Mm. And, when you send a note saying you're trying to sort out the bills, we certainly don't have to get into the detailed specifics of what the conversations were, but take me behind the scenes a little bit of what that work actually is. People know that your job based on what they see on television. What don't they see on television? What's the real job in getting something like that sorted?
Well, I have a couple of jobs. I got elected in 2012, and I represent Northeastern Pennsylvania, and I regard the most important job that I have to stick up for the citizens of Northeastern Pennsylvania. It's an area where the economy has had trouble, has been bumping along. People have been disappointed with the way their lives have worked out. In this area. A lot of it had to do with NAFTA and manufacturing jobs going to Mexico. Economic challenges are huge in my area. And one of the aims that I had was to make sure we get our fair share of federal investments in Northeastern Pennsylvania to help stimulate the economy, help create good paying jobs. I've made good strides in that area. I got myself onto the House Appropriations Committee. And that was a couple of terms ago. And since then, I've gathered enough seniority that I've been able to take over as one of the 12 chairs of appropriations, which is a big deal. And it has helped me bring home a our fair share of the federal largesse to keep the economy going and hopefully improve it in northeastern Pennsylvania. That's one job. Another job I have is that I got elected to House Democratic leadership back in 2018, and there are 9 of us on the leadership team. And my job there is I'm a co-chair of the DPCC, the Democratic Policy and Communications Committee. It's the messaging committee. And it's perfect for me, Dave, because I have had an abiding interest and fascination with the business of messaging and conveying messages and persuading people.
One of the things that the Republicans seem to do so well is have a broad message that their entire membership can stick to and stick to the talking points, whereas Democrats seem to have suffered with that. Is that fair?
Yeah, I don't think you'll find anybody to disagree with you when you say the Republicans are better at singing from the same song sheet.
Right.
And there are a number of reasons for that, and all of them are above my pay grade.
But you're working on it.
I am, and it's a natural for me because I'm very interested in persuasion, and it started from my work as a courtroom jury trial lawyer. I mean, how do you take your client's cause and get 12 strangers to care about your client's cause, even to listen to your story, let alone render full justice to your client's side? That is a fascinating endeavor. It is the longest learning curve I've ever been on. When I started out, Dave, I was horrendous. I was an embarrassment to lawyers everywhere when I went in court. And it was because, I was always a bookworm. I mean, I was at Hamilton, I was a library rat. I was one of those guys that that all night reading room in the library, I'd be in there. And I stayed that way through law school. I did very well in law school, and ended up being a very good legal writer, and wrote a lot of winning briefs and things like that. But it came time for me to go in the courtroom and persuade the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker of the validity of my client's side of the matter. And one thing I found out right quick was if they don't understand you, you're going to come in second. And there is nothing more painful than losing a jury trial. I really hated it, and I resolved to do everything in my power not to let that happen. And what saved me was, first of all, a very nurturing atmosphere with the law firm. I started out with a big blue chip law firm in Philadelphia, terrific people. I stayed there a couple of years, but I came to Scranton because my wife Marion's father, Bob Munley, had a very burgeoning law practice in Scranton. And he told us, he made us the offer we couldn't refuse. Come to Scranton and take a 50% pay cut. But the idea was he was going to teach us how to do it. He was a tremendous trial lawyer. Was so proud to be an advocate for the downtrodden in northeastern Pennsylvania, and I learned so much from him. It was a nurturing atmosphere. So he would throw you into court with some case that nobody else wanted to try, and you'd come back and you'd have to walk by his office, Dave. You'd have to walk right by my father-in-law's office on the way back from court, and he would see me head down, shoulders slumped, tail between legs, and he'd say, "Hey, what's the matter with you?" And then I'd start to answer him. He said, "Did you lose another one?" And I think I lost 4 in a row for my first. Well, I won my first one, then I lost 4 in a row. And he said, "How many is that in a row now?" And I tell him, and he said, "That's nothing." He said, "I lost 9 in a row one time. You get your rear end back in the court." He didn't put it that genteelly, but you get back there and keep going. And that is what goes for nurturing in Scranton, Pennsylvania. But I did keep going. And what saved me was focus groups. focus groups are wonderful things. Of course, we all know that, Madison Avenue ad men and women use them all the time to figure
Sure.
out what kind of packaging to put, consumer goods in, that sort of
Sure.
thing. But what it really, really helps, a guy like me, instead of trying out my $50 words, my SAT vocabulary on juries, I listen to how people actually talk to each other over the back fence, and how they persuade each other, and they use analogies that you would lose the point on the SAT if you filled in the oval for that one in the question. They talk to each other in ways that it takes a great study. And Dave, I would do 6 and 7 focus groups per major trial that I would go to trial on. And we put all the facts in front of them. We'd say, you have to come to a unanimous decision. Which way are you going to go? And they would fight with each other, and they would use arguments, and they would persuade each other. And then, then there was the one guy in the middle in the back with the overalls, and he didn't say anything for the full 3-hour focus group of the deliberation. And I'd be in the media room going back and forth, trying to listen to what that man said. And then finally I heard what he said. And he said something that was incredibly important to the case. And still waters run deep. And anyway, this is the kind of thing that I did. And I ended up doing very well as a trial lawyer. I went my last 10 years, I think my last 12 years as a trial lawyer without losing a jury trial.
Wow.
It was just because I learned to speak the vernacular, and I learned to, you could tell, what pieces of evidence people responded to, and which witnesses they liked and which ones they hated, and things like that. But it was
that makes sense. That makes sense. Then when you say, you started by saying you spend a lot of time looking at polls, do you take that focus group mentality with you in how you run your campaigns and how you control your message, working on messaging? That's a huge factor, I imagine.
Totally. I mean, the transferability between being a courtroom jury trial lawyer and being a politician, it's unbelievable. And it's 2 major things. Number one, the research. It's not focus groups, but it's polls. Yeah. Trust your research and go with it. This is not people sitting around in club chairs theorizing about what messages sell. This is actually tested messages. And that's so important. So trusting the research and acting on it. And then just the work ethic. I mean, nothing makes you a worker like losing a jury trial. Those cases that I won for 10 or 12 years at the end of my career, I didn't win them from genius. I'm not a genius. I bludgeoned those cases to death. I just worked them to death. And that's what you need to do if you want to succeed in the political realm.
And then when you talk about the two main jobs you have, one is representing your constituents in Pennsylvania, and then the other is a more national focused, party focused approach. How do you balance those two? Because not always will what's good for the country is good for Northeast Pennsylvania, or vice versa.
Yeah, right. That's absolutely true. For example, I mentioned NAFTA. NAFTA, had pros and cons. It bestowed good things and bad things to different parts of America. So I don't spend a whole lot of time on things like that where there is no, NAFTA hurt Northeastern Pennsylvania, but it really helped San Diego, right? So it doesn't make sense for me to try to spread that Northeastern Pennsylvania message through the Democratic caucus. But the rest of it, it's a matter of emphasis, really, and understanding, for example, the importance of bricks and mortar infrastructure to Northeastern Pennsylvania. It means jobs for people who work with their hands, union jobs, and it's that's huge. So that's the kind of thing that I can take from this area in Northeastern Pennsylvania and make sure they get the message in the Democratic caucus One of the things I talk about a lot is, I'm coming to you right now from South Scranton, and this is where they mined coal here. 150 years ago, Scranton was the Houston, Texas of America. It was the energy source. It was also, I'm very proud to say, and I brag about Scranton all the time, because this is where labor rights really were given birth to. There was a man named John Mitchell that came to Scranton in 1902. He was from Chicago. And what he found was these mine owners treating their workers miserably, having their way with them, just not paying them hardly anything and working them half to death. And when they did die, they threw them out of the company house. All of that was what really happened. And one of the ways they were able to pull it off was the natural mistrust and dislike of the different ethnic groups that were all the mine workers. So you had waves of immigration. You had the Welsh, and then the Irish, and then the Eastern Europeans, and then the Italians, and they all lived in different sections, and they didn't like each other and didn't understand each other. A lot of them didn't even speak the same language. And the mine owners used that to play them off against each other so they wouldn't organize. Somehow, one day I'll figure out how he did it. John Mitchell came to Scranton, and he got them to put aside their ethnic differences and dislikes, and he got them to go out on strike in 1902. And it was right here in Scranton that happened. And who represented the mine workers? Clarence Darrow, the great lawyer. Every courtroom jury trial lawyer worth his or her salt has read books by and about Clarence Darrow, and he represented the mine workers. And in an arbitration, this was something that shut down America. When you shut off the energy supply, anthracite coal, nobody could do anything. You couldn't heat your house in Manhattan. You couldn't run your steel foundry. All of it. America came to a grinding halt, so much so that the president of the United States, Teddy Roosevelt, came to Scranton and forced the mine owners to recognize the unions and go to arbitration. It's a wonderful story. They got the kids out of the mines. They established a 40-hour work week, overtime if you did more, and introduced concepts of workplace safety that had not gone on before. So, yes, there are an awful lot of great messages from northeastern Pennsylvania that I do carry to the caucus.
That's great. And then, you mentioned the key part of your job is fighting for your fair share for your constituents, which requires obviously influence, which you've been able to gain and build over time with some of the positions you mentioned and some of the committees you sit on. There seems to be this balance or imbalance of a select few with large Twitter followings and large media followings that have perceived influence, and then many who aren't as notable, but I imagine are working just as hard. So how do you find your way through within the House of Representatives to get that influence to get your fair share?
Well, I mean, all of the usual social skills. I mean, people, right? And it's something that I started to learn at Hamilton, how to talk to other people.
Yeah.
And they're not only are they people, they're wonderful people. As I mentioned, all of those things I told you about hard work and a work ethic, they don't just apply to me. Mm-hmm. Every one of those members of Congress, including on the Republican side, I'm great friends with an awful lot of Republicans because you can see which ones are the earnest ones and the ones that really want to see if they can make a good account of themselves and do the right thing. I've introduced more bipartisan bills than any other Democrat in the House in my 8.5 years in Congress. And it's not to take away anything from my progressive credentials. It doesn't, but it follows very much the model of terrific members of Congress who stuck up for their own principles, but were able to make friends across the aisle anyway. That is a vital part of the job. I actually got to be The first thing I ran for in the caucus was I ran for to be president of the freshman class in 2013. And I got elected. We actually did co-presidents, but it's really it was a honorific. It was glorified social director is what it was. And what I found quick enough was that to attract people to a social event, you needed to have a good speaker that everybody wanted to hear. Mm. So I had a breakfast with former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. Wow, what a great lady! She comes up to my midriff. But she is a giant in international diplomacy, and I got to be friends with her at that breakfast. In fact, you might remember when Assad had used chemical weapons on citizens in Syria. Mm-hmm. President Obama was considering lobbing some ordnance at the runways in Damascus, and he decided to let Congress decide. Oh, thanks a lot. Here I am, a freshman in Congress. I don't know which way is up, and I have to decide on that. Well, what did I do? I called Madeleine Albright, and she took my call. And for 25 minutes, she talked to me, and she gave me this wonderful advice that I won't repeat because it was confidential, but she gave me incredible, the kind of advice that when the words come out of the person's mouth, as soon as they exit the person's mouth, that they are words that are wise and true and just, and that should be written down. And that's what I got out of the other one. I got Bill Gates to be a speaker at a lunch. And Bill Gates, he spoke about the polio project. He threw himself into that, eradicating polio worldwide. And it's just about completed now, largely because of his efforts. Well, that was actually something I had worked on before. I was in the Rotary Club, and I became Rotary District Governor, and I spent a lot of time working on that when I was a lawyer. But I got to introduce Bill Gates to this crew, and I think it was all 84 freshmen came to that lecture to hear him talk. He talked about polio. I gave him the full introduction because Rotary International put about $287 million into fighting polio back in the late 80s. And so every Rotarian knows about that. I got up, I introduced him. After the speech, I had 7 Republican freshman members of Congress come up to me and say, Matt, we didn't know you were a Rotarian. We were all presidents of Rotary clubs. Huh. So it's, the answer is you use your human skills and your connections and things like that.
Relationships, and then back to that persuasive argument ability, right?
Something like that.
So
you're not too bad at it yourself, by the way. I've listened to an awful lot of your podcasts, and I listened to Christy Vilsack was a terrific interview, and I know her a little bit because when she ran for Congress, I helped her, and I spoke to her several times, and of course, Secretary Vilsack is doing a great job.
Yeah,
I listened to your one of President Whitman.
Yep.
Who I've also gotten to know a little bit. He's had a couple of visits with me in Washington, and wow, what a wonderful man. What a credit to the college. And one thing that he said in the interview you had with him was about one of the signal features, one of the signal assets of Hamilton College that really should always be discussed. And that is that the professors who teach at a place like Hamilton, they're self-selecting. They want to go to a small college like Hamilton. They want to go to a place where their advice and counsel and mentoring of young people is wanted.
Right.
And they want to do it.
Right.
And it's I'm glad you said that, because that is such an important feature of the college that people should be talking about a lot more.
What brought you to Clinton, New York? How'd you end up at Hamilton?
I love the campus. And I had a bunch of choices. I was living in Toronto at the time. My dad's job took us to Canada, and I actually got into University of Toronto Trinity College, where the students wore black robes
Hmm.
to school. Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's kind of they say well, of themselves, they say it's the Harvard of Canada, but
Mhm.
um, I turned that down because I was desperate to get away from my parents, as I think most
As
kids.
many teenagers are, sure.
I went to Hamilton because I liked the size, and um, I know you're going to ask me what, if I had known, what
Yeah,
would I have done differently? I
yeah,
kind of don't like that question because it implies that I have regrets in my life.
yeah.
But I gave it some thought, and the answer is I regret not taking advantage of that desire on the part of the Hamilton professors to get to know me personally
Mm,
and to help guide me through life. My God, do you ever need guidance when you're 18 years old?
yeah,
And with a couple of exceptions, two people, and I'll tell you why. I I can't. I had a very myopic view of the world, and I thought that the kids that hung around the professors are just trying to curry favor with the
sure,
professor to get a
sure.
better grade.
I could relate to that. Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
And I intentionally avoided professors for that reason, out of pride. And I'm going to do it my way, and I'm going
Hmm.
to get an A on my own and without kissing up. Um, and I'm kicking myself now.
Yeah.
Had I known
Hmm.
that those people were there to help guide me through life, and had I known how much mentoring I really could have used at that point in my life, I wouldn't have done that. I would have taken advantage of it. But there were a couple of people that really kind of forced their way into my life, and I was grateful ever since, Dave. And
Yeah.
one of them was Professor Sidna Weiss of the German department, and she, she was wonderful. The German department, they were all connected with I think they were all Princeton grads, and they were all very tight knit crew. But Professor Weiss took an interest in me, and I mean, here's the thing: when you're in public life and you're later on in life, and people say nice things about you because you've accomplished some things, and that's happened to you and that's happened to me. It's very nice. But when you're young, and those kinds of compliments are very rare and few and far between, when somebody gives you one, that means a ton. It
Sure.
means a lot. And you're at a time in your life where you're wondering if you're really ever going to amount to anything, and somebody gives you an encouraging word. Wow, does that go a long way? Sidney Weiss was one of those people, and the other one was the recently retired Newman chaplain, Father John Krogan,
Mm.
who I got to know very well. And I can tell you, at various crises points in my life, I have called upon him for advice and counsel. And in fact, in 1985, 2 years after I graduated Hamilton, he came down here to Scranton and he married my wife and me.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's great.
Friendships like that and mentors like that, you just can't measure the impact they have on you. And if I have to kick myself about one thing, it's had I known the value of that, I would have taken better advantage of it. So if you're listening to this on WHCL,
There you go.
go find a professor and find out what they have to tell you about life.
Yeah, it's great insight, and I think it takes a certain type of maturity to understand that saying you don't know something is okay, and asking for help is okay. And I think, thinking about professors as a resource like that, I think is is an opportunity that exists on that campus. But I'm sure you and I aren't the only ones that have that wish. But then and then you look at the story you told about Madeline Albright, right? You thought enough to realize you didn't know and asked her for insight and help. It's the same sort of scenario we're talking about that you can do on the college campus with these wise professors. I think it's a really good comment. So talk to me about what life was like at Hamilton in the early 1980s.
Oh, well, I spent 3 years there. I took my junior year abroad at the London School of Economics. That was where I met my wife, Marion. That's how I ended up in northeastern Pennsylvania. Um, but yeah, I arrived on campus in the fall of 1979 with the usual satchel of hopes and dreams and ambitions and insecurities. And um, I did get, I was very impressionable. I listened to the guidance that I got. Peter Marcy was my advisor, and he I signed up for Spanish. My father said, sign up for Spanish. It's an easy A. And Peter Marcy said, you don't want to take Spanish. You've had Latin and Greek in high school. And it's true, I did. I had 4 years of Latin and 1 year of Greek. He said, you understand declensions and word endings and all of that. Why don't you take German? It'll be more challenging, but you can handle it. I shrugged my shoulders. I said, okay. And I took German. I took enough German to, I think, minor in it. And that's how I got to know Sidney Weiss. What else? Oh, I had heard London School of Economics. I had heard it was a great party. Go to LSE for a semester. It's pass fail, and it's just a big party. So I signed up for it. It was a returning senior that told me about it. I signed up for it. And I get a call from the Dean of Academic Affairs. And I thought, what did I do now? And I'm going into the principal's office, and the dean said to me, look, I see you signed up for one semester at LSE. And he said, look, you and I both know that's a drink fest. That's all that is. He said, you can do better for yourself than that. Why don't you sign up for the full year? You apply directly to the University of London, and they take you, and you spend all year. So I shrugged my shoulders and I said, okay. And that's what I did. So I was impressionable, and I listened to, they were able to point me in directions. But I told you, I was there to make good grades. I was unsure whether I was ever going to be a productive member of society. So I decided I better work a little harder and try to do as well as I could.
And was being a lawyer the plan all throughout?
I think my mother was a lawyer, Dave, and my godfather was a lawyer. I admired them greatly. I wasn't that great at math and science. And so engineering and medicine were probably out of the picture. And again, I wanted to see if I could make something of myself. And I think law was definitely in the picture.
And was public service part of the plan as well, or when did that come along?
It was never part of the plan. I always admired the people that put in the effort to do public service, pretty much at any level. That the more local it is, the tougher it is, and
Sure.
People yell at you all the time on a school board, and the election fights to get on those things.
Sure.
They say that the smaller the stakes, the nastier the fight.
Sure.
But I had always admired the people that did public service. I took APP in the government department. By the way, Phil Klinkner's interview with you was wonderful.
He's great. He's something else.
Moment of that.
He is something else.
And he comes down and he brings kids to see me, and I love talking to them. And those kids get brighter and brighter. I think the only way I'd get on campus at Hamilton would be breaking and entering. Right now, and it's another thing that President Whitman mentioned was the stresses on them. That the kids that get into Hamilton these days are super achievers, and really all of them are going places, and they put that pressure on themselves. And he mentioned that there's a lot more utilization of the mental health services on campus, and I was glad to hear that because I worry about that. I worry about those kids at Hamilton that are putting too much on themselves. So again, if you're listening on WHCL, how you do at Hamilton is not life or death. You know, one time I got a job interview with a big law firm in Philadelphia. And what was that fellow's name? He was the head of the bankruptcy department at a huge blue chip law firm. And he looked at my transcript from Hamilton. He says, he said, I don't know if we can hire you here. Your grades at Hamilton were too good. It doesn't look like you're any fun at all. So that's my advice to the folks listening at Hamilton is it's not life or death. Life is a very, very long road.
Yeah.
And what happens at Hamilton is just a little piece of it.
What do you, what kind of message do you have for those students that come see you about getting into your line of work or doing work in government?
You have to like people. I think that if you want to do it, the only good reason for doing it is to help people. And you have to like people. And it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy because if you like people, you will succeed in politics. You get up on somebody's porch, Dave, and there's only two things they want to know about you as a candidate. And it isn't what party are you in. It's, does this person care about me? And will this person work hard in the job? And once they know those things, everything else melts away. I'm in they talk about me. I'm in a district that President Trump won twice.
Yep.
And I'm a Democrat.
Yep.
And to win in fact, there are only 3 Democrats in the U.S. House right now who successfully defended districts that President Trump won twice. And I'm one of them. And the other 2 are not running for re-election. So I'm in for a maelstrom coming up next time. But that's the whole thing. Is I overperformed Joe Biden in northeastern Pennsylvania by over 8%. And he's from here.
Yeah.
And that's because I think I've been able to establish my own brand. And that's the brand. I care about these are my friends and neighbors. I've lived here for almost 35 years and I care about these people and I work like a demon for them.
And how much time then, both normally and in job one, as you described the 2 elements of your job, do you have to spend, with those friends and neighbors? And then given the maelstrom you said is headed your way, I imagine there's even more so that you're going to have to spend time pressing the flesh. Yeah.
Get to spend time pressing.
Yeah. There you go.
Sure. I love that. Boy, that was the worst thing on me. The pandemic, staying at home, sitting by my router, raising money to run ads on. That was what that election last year was all about. Who has the best TV ads and the most of them? What a horrible. That's the opposite of why I got into this business. I want to get out and I want to press the flesh and I want to listen to people and write down their names and numbers when they have problems and try to help them with it. I'll tell you, we're going through a terrible time getting out of Afghanistan right now.
Sure.
I don't have much to say about what the overall military strategy and, the strategic policy is. I don't have much to say about that. But one thing I can do is I can use my congressional office to help get people out. And so far, we've been working on 11 cases. And so far, we got 3 Afghans out. 2 were interpreters and 1 was a musician.
That's
all
great.
of them worked with the American forces. You look for your opportunities to help people. And in a job like this, there's lots of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you talk about pressing the flesh, it's not just a matter of just truly, shaking hands and kissing babies, because I imagine, and I've seen it very, very little in my life, but the people who show up and want to talk to a candidate have a lot to say. I mean, I've told the story before of when I lived in New York, in Brooklyn. I worked at the Park Slope Food Co-op, which is some of the most politically active people in the world was shopping at that store. And my job was to stand outside and help people with their shopping carts. So I'd watch the world go by, and there was I think it was a city council candidate you're just canvassing for signatures to get him on the ballot. And he ended up engaged in a conversation with some lifelong local who knew everything about every single thing that ever happened in that city, and just fired away questions, and was just beating him to death with all these different, well, what about this ordinance? And what are you going to do about this? And this poor candidate, this young guy, looked like he had just seen a ghost and couldn't get away fast enough. And I imagine you're dealing with that a lot when you're running for office. But those are the people that you really got to service, right?
Yeah. It's a spectrum. I mean, people have different levels of how much they're going to press you for.
Yeah.
A lot of them are just, well, Matt, we like you, and we know you're working hard, and we're with you. Just we want good government. Others, they want you to come over and chase the skunks out from under their porch and fill the potholes in front of their driveway. Much more needy and demanding. So you get the full spectrum.
Yeah.
But I will say this. You asked me, how'd you get interested in politics? One of the things that led me that way, in addition to admiring the people who do it, Marion and I started a free legal clinic about 10 years ago. And we started it in a place called the Back Mountain, which is west of Wilkes-Barre. And it's a well-to-do area. And you don't expect it to be filled with people of terrible poverty. But that's the way poverty is. It doesn't come out and show itself to you. You have to go find it. And when you see it, it stuns you. And I did, I did that. My nights would be Monday nights at the clinic, and I'd wrap up business at the office, and I'd drive up to the clinic. I'd open up about 6:00, and I would be helping people all night, and I would wrap up 11:30 at night. Dog tired, missed dinner, driving home. And Dave, I was never so happy about where I was in the world as right then. I just felt like this is where I need to be. And some of the stories of the help that I was able to give people for free, it was just, made me feel so good. And it made me want to look into public office as a means of having a bigger platform from which to help people.
I see. And is that that feeling of helping people is what's keeping you going? It's going to keep you going for reelection?
Yes, it does. And it balances out, more than balances out, the people that call up and yell at you for something that's, you had nothing to do with or wasn't even true.
And you see yourself doing this job for a long time?
I just turned 60. I'll run for another term. We're facing a redistricting in Pennsylvania, so I have yet to see whether they're going to give me a district that I can possibly win in. If so, I'll run, and it's not terrible. It's a lot like a trial. It's kind of fun. There's strategery involved, young man, and we've had some significant challenges the last couple of terms, and we've had a lot of fun with it. I mean, trial techniques, laying booby traps for the other side. You say this, and I bet they're going to say that, and then we got them, kind of thing. And the tactics and strategy is quite fun. I'll give you an example. I had an opponent last term who accused, everybody got PPP loans for their businesses. By the way, the bankers were the heroes of that. They were the ones that connected the small businesses up with the PPP loans. And my wife's law firm, where I used to practice with her, they got one. Because they have payroll to make, and nothing was coming in, and I found out about that when in the newspaper, and my opponent accused me of we're at the debate. My opponent accused me of smoothing out a PPP loan for my wife's law firm, and I was ready for it, and I said, well, your family's construction firm got an even bigger PPP loan. And I'm still waiting for my thank you note. There's some joy in these in these battles, and I do have fun with it. A lot of it has to do with why I like doing courtroom jury trials.
You're already starting on focused on what that strategy is going to be like for reelection. What's gonna win it for you?
We're starting to look at the broad outlines. We don't even know who the opponent's going to be. They're running ads. Something called the American Action Network is running ads against me. You know, Cartwright's the worst thing that ever happened to Western civilization, and it's tiresome. But what we're doing is, you know, the traditional things: getting out, getting to the picnics and parades and festivals. And thank God they're back, because I couldn't live without going out and being with people.
Yeah,
we're being careful. You know, there's this Delta variant going around, and if I suspect that people haven't been vaccinated, I'm extra careful.
Yeah.
So we're doing all the usual things and building up the war chest, and I'll give you the 800 number later, Dave, for your contribution.
You bet. It's coming, and I'll put it in the show notes. We'll hit up all the listeners. But yeah, you know, every opportunity, right? Take advantage.
That's right.
Anything we didn't cover you were hoping to cover?
Well, I forgot to mention, my brother Patrick went to Hamilton, class of '88.
Okay.
Right. He loved it there. And my son, Jack, class of 2015. And I remember he got in, he had some other choices. Oh my goodness. I think he applied to 21 colleges.
Wow.
It's Dave, it's easier now than when you and I did it. Now you have a mouse in your right hand where you're copying and pasting your essay from one application to the next, and then your left hand you have mom's credit card, right? And he applied to 21 colleges and he got into 14 of them. And I want to hit him on the head. Said, Jack, what are you doing? So Hamilton was one of his top choices, and Wake Forest. He went down to visit Wake Forest. He got in there. We went down, and I took my golf gloves and played the Wake Forest golf course. And I said, "This is lovely, Jack. You got to go here."
A little nicer than the Hamilton course, I imagine.
And warmer.
That's right. More opportunities to play.
And he said, Dad, a couple of weeks later, he said, "Dad, I'm going to go to Hamilton." I said, "Hamilton? How did you pick Hamilton? You don't have to do that to please me." And he said, "No." He said, "It's very chill at Hamilton. It's very chill." I said, "Wait till February, Jack. You'll find out about chill."
That's right. Well, Congressman, I appreciate it. I told you I was going to keep you for an hour, and I'm coming up on time, and I want to make sure you get back to work and do far more important things than talk to me. So thank you for the time. I appreciate it. Good luck with everything, and we'll help you fill up that war chest with this show.
Thank you for doing these podcasts, Dave. They're terrific. I learned something from each one of them, and I'll continue to listen to them.
I appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Let that conversation be a lesson to all future guests of this show. Because anytime you want to steer the conversation in the direction you want it to go, just compliment me and tell me how much you love this show. It's a smart tactic. But I saw what you were doing, Congressman, and I let it happen because, as you said, who doesn't like a compliment? It was an interesting chat. He's an interesting guy, and I'm incredibly grateful to have had an opportunity to talk to him, especially during a very busy time. And as you heard, instrumental in the development of that infrastructure bill. So you're welcome. You have been listening to Had I Known on WHCL-FM, Clinton, New York. Had I Known.buzzsprout.com. Had I Known Show on social media. As always, my thanks to Dr. Michael Woods for supplying the music on the show. And once again, Doc is going to play us out. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll talk to you next week. Yes, next week.
Had I Known podcast show on your radio or take it to go.